Belinda Hutchinson, thank you for taking part in the Leaders Unleashed series.
Jo, it's a pleasure.
Your role is as chairman of the board for QBE. At the moment, there's only a handful of the top 100 companies that have women in those top jobs. What are your thoughts on quotas for women in executive positions and on boards?
I'm not a great believer in quotas. I actually think you get people to embrace change if you convince them of the merits of the case rather than setting quotas. So I actually think we can demonstrate the value of that proposition with what's happened in the last couple of years, because we haven't actually introduced quotas in this country. We've introduced ASX corporate governance guidelines around gender diversity and requiring companies to disclose what policies they have to help women. And if you look at what's resulted from that and a number of other programs that organisations like the Australian Institute of Company Directors have put in place recently around mentoring women to bring them onto boards, the numbers have actually improved quite dramatically. So, for example, 2 years ago we had 8.3% of women on top 200 boards, and now in a very short period of time, actually it's 18 months I think, we're now at 12.7%. Now we have to keep that momentum going, but I think you win more with honey than you do with vinegar, and I just think it's much better if we can explain the business case for having women in these senior leadership roles rather than forcing people to adopt practices which may not necessarily lead to the right outcomes.
Do you think there are personal or structural barriers for women who want to achieve leadership positions inside these large organisations?
Look, I think it's a long-term issue that results from a whole range of inhibitors. So, for example, I think there is a cultural issue within companies whereby men have always been in these roles, and therefore there is an inclination by men to choose men for these roles. But I think, you know, there's also the practicalities of women staying in the workforce. And, you know, we want to have babies, we want to have families, we want to support our families, we want to support our children. And what we should really be having is workplaces which provide for women to have families, to support their children, but at the same time be encouraged to come back into the workforce. And I think if you look at what's happening with most major companies in Australia today, they are coming up with much more workplace-friendly environments. So they are providing real encouragement for women who go off and have children to come back, to provide workplace childcare facilities, to provide for paid parental leave, and to do a whole range of programs which really encourage women to take on leadership roles and stay in those roles rather than once they go off and have children or once they go overseas and travel, that they do want to come back to those companies because they're seriously encouraged to do so.
You're also president of Chief Executive Women. For women on the leadership path, what would be your top tips or advice on how to accelerate their success?
You need to have the technical training and the technical ability to do whatever the job you're doing. So that's obviously extremely important. So that's a given. But I think in terms of women in particular, there is a tendency by women to be really wanting to be absolutely perfect at their job. Whereas I think in many cases women are loath to apply for a job which is the next level up because they don't think they're quite ready for it. Whereas I think there is a tendency by men to say, I think I'll give that a go, I think I'll be okay at that, you know, that's all right. And I think that is a bit of an issue for women which we really need to focus on and say, no, I can give that a go. I don't actually have to be perfect at it. If my boss says to me, yes, I think you're ready for the job, then you probably are ready for the job and you should give it a go. And I think the other thing is, if you are moving to the stage of having children, you just need to make sure that you have the support you need. So make sure you've got the right childcare support in place. Make sure you've got the right family support. And you've got to make sure that you look after yourself as well as your family and make sure that you're being looked after. Because if it all becomes too much, then you just give up and go, it's all too hard. But if you have the right support in place and you've planned it properly, I think women can do it just as well as men.
This is, of course, I think the reason that a lot of us are drawn to the Hunger Project, the role that it plays in unleashing women leaders in the communities where they work. Why is it that you were drawn to the Hunger Project?
Well, my husband and I were looking for a project where we could really become involved, actively involved, where we would think we would make a permanent difference to communities which were really struggling. And what attracted us to the Hunger Project was it wasn't just about giving aid, it wasn't just about giving money, it was about really empowering communities to make a permanent change in their way of life. And I guess the other thing that attracted us was that there's a limited time in terms of the giving program. So, for example, the project that we're supporting in Malawi, it's a 5-year commitment. And after 5 years, if this program, and we're now almost 3 years into the project, so I don't think it's an if anymore, it's when this project demonstrates that this community is self-sustaining in terms of having ended poverty, they won't need us anymore. And what a great result that is.
Roger, your husband, and your daughter Emily have visited Malawi. What was their reaction to it?
Oh, it was really interesting because I was the one who discovered the Hunger Project as an organisation that I really wanted to support. And I think, you know, when you read about these things and how, you know, well, the Hunger Project does it better than anybody else, I think there was, you know, a bit of scepticism perhaps in the family about that. But when my husband Roger and daughter Emily went to Malawi, it was a real opportunity for them to see hands-on, you know, what the Hunger Project does in communities. So they went to an existing epicentre, because our epicentre was starting up, and they saw the results of a project that had been going for 3 years and how there had been a fundamental shift in that community, and the engagement of the villagers in this project was just really fantastically encouraging. So, for example, the food bank that they'd set up to take in grain so that the people could get through the dry season and get through times when there wasn't enough food around was absolutely full and overflowing. There was a nursing centre where, you know, the women were able to go if they were having babies or they needed their babies to be checked for health issues. There was a little schoolroom where the kids were actually being educated and the mums were being educated in how to read and to write. And there was just this great sense of community engagement but you know, both Roger and Emily came back and said, this is just a fantastic program, we have to support it. And ever since then we've been totally committed to the Hunger Project, and we think it's wonderful.
How important is it for you to have your family involved in your giving?
I think that's been one of the best things about our involvement in the Hunger Project is that it's a family commitment. We were very fortunate a few years ago when my husband sold his business to be able to set up a family foundation, and the children are all directors of the family foundation along with my husband and I, and we have quarterly meetings where we look at various not-for-profit organisations that we want to support, and each of the children brings organisations that they've become interested in to the board meeting so that we review and agree on which ones we want to support. And I just think it's been a fantastic opportunity for our children to see how they can get involved and they can really make a difference in the community themselves as well as ourselves. And in fact, one of our other daughters is now working for a not-for-profit organisation called Social Ventures Australia. And I think, you know, that's probably come about as a result of our family foundation, and what a great result that is.
On a personal level, what's it been like for you being involved in the Hunger Project?
You know, I come from a finance background, and people say you only ever see things from a financial outputs basis. But it's not that. It's about achieving measurable results. You know, it's all very well to say you want to give money to an organisation, but I want to see that there are measurable outcomes from the money that we give. And the Hunger Project is an organisation which does demonstrate measurable results. And, you know, it's actually making a permanent difference to people's lives. And that's what we want to do. We want to help people to help themselves. That's actually the mission statement of our foundation, helping people to help themselves. And it's not just individuals, it's families and communities. And that's what the Hunger Project's about. So that's why it actually meshed so well with what we're doing as a family foundation, because the Hunger Project's mission is very much aligned to ours, which is really changing people, helping them change their own lives permanently for a better life.
Belinda Hutchinson, on behalf of all of the investors in the Hunger Project, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today.
It's an absolute pleasure, Joan.